You've probably seen this scene 100 times. A strip mall, a faded sign, a row of oversized machines humming against a wall. Someone drags in two laundry baskets, one arm hooked through a bottle of detergent, the other digging through a pocket for coins or a reload card. Kids are sitting on plastic chairs. A dryer door slams shut. Somebody stares at their phone for 40 minutes because they have nowhere else to be. It is one of the most ordinary consumer rituals in modern life, and it doesn't exactly feel luxurious, or efficient, or especially profitable. In fact, laundromats often look like the kind of business you'd assume is barely hanging on. Small footprint, old equipment, minimal staff. Half the time the place seems one broken vending machine away from collapse. And yet some of these businesses make surprisingly serious money. That is the part most people miss, because when you walk into a laundromat, what you see is a boring room full of spinning metal boxes. What you don't see is the kind of business model that small retailers, service shops and restaurants would kill for. A business that can sit quietly in the background of a neighborhood for years, sometimes decades, collecting money from one of the least glamorous but most unavoidable parts of everyday life. So the question is not just why laundromats exist. The real question is why something that looks this small, this low status, and this unremarkable can be so financially powerful. And the answer is deeper than clean clothes. The obvious explanation is simple. People need laundry. That's true. But it's also not enough. People need groceries too. People need haircuts, pharmacy runs, car repairs, cheap meals, shoes, phone service, childcare. Plenty of necessary businesses are still hard to run. Plenty of them have thin margins, high labor costs, brutal competition, and a constant risk of being wiped out by rent increases, staffing problems, or a bad month. People need it. Explains why a business category survives. It does not explain why some operators quietly build dependable cash flow from it. If laundromats were just tiny stores that sold wash cycles the same way a cafe sells coffee, they would look like a much shakier bet than they do. The foot traffic is inconsistent. The customer experience is basic. The branding is usually forgettable. There's often no real upsell magic, no charismatic staff, no big premium feeling, and still, the economics can work. That tells you something important right away. The customer thinks they are buying one thing. The owner is monetizing something slightly different. From the outside, it looks like soap, water, and a room full of machines. Underneath, it's a system for turning an unavoidable household task into recurring local revenue. And that shift matters because once you stop looking at a laundromat as a humble service shop and start looking at it as a machine that sits in the middle of a weekly life obligation, the whole business starts to look different. The first reason is simple, but stronger than it sounds. Laundry resets. Not once a year, not once in a while, not when the economy is booming. It resets every week, sometimes several times a week. Clothes do not care whether you are tired, broke, distracted, or busy. Towels pile up anyway. Work uniforms need to be cleaned anyway. Kids still run out of clean clothes anyway. And that means the demand isn't just real. It's recurring, stubborn, and hard to postpone for long. That's a rare thing. Most small businesses have to persuade you to show up. They have to attract you, entertain you, discount for you, remind you, market to you, maybe even reinvent themselves for you. A laundromat does not need to create desire. It just waits for routine to reassert itself. And that routine is intensely local. People do not usually travel across town to compare laundry prices with the discipline of an airline shopper. They go to the place that is close enough, safe enough, functional enough, and predictable enough to fit into life. Once a household settles into that rhythm, inertia takes over. It becomes the laundromat they always use. That may sound boring. It is boring, and that's exactly the advantage, because boring demand is often stronger than exciting demand. It does not depend on trends. It does not need great taste. It does not need a viral moment. It just needs the same basic reality to be true next week that was true this week. Dirty clothes are very good at making sure that happens, but even that doesn't explain the most interesting part. Because the real trick of the laundromat business is not just that people keep coming back. It's that the owner is not personally doing most of the work. Think about how many small businesses are basically labor wrapped in branding. A haircut requires a barber. A meal requires cooks and servers. A convenience store requires someone standing there all day making each transaction possible. In a lot of businesses, every dollar has a human attached to it. Laundromats flip that. The customer loads the machine. The customer waits. The customer unloads the machine. The customer folds. The customer carries the clothes back out. Once the equipment is in place, each cycle becomes a semi-automated sale. The owner's role is not to perform the service in real time. It is to build and maintain the environment where the customer can perform most of the service themselves. That matters a lot, because labor is where many neighborhood businesses get crushed. The more staff you need, the more things can go wrong. Scheduling, training, turnover, payroll taxes, theft, inconsistency, burnout, supervision. Laundromats have their own headaches, but they are different headaches. Once the store is operating, a big part of the revenue engine can keep moving without someone actively selling every minute of the day. That is why a laundromat can look dead from the sidewalk and still be financially alive. It does not need the emotional energy of a restaurant or the constant transactional choreography of retail. It makes money through equipment utilization, which is where the whole category starts to look less like a cute service business and more like neighborhood infrastructure. And once you see that, a better question opens up. What are customers really paying for? Because they are not just paying to make clothes wet and then dry again. What they are really buying is access. A laundromat is not mainly in the laundry business. It is in the access business. It sells you temporary use of a capability you either do not have at home, do not have enough of at home, or cannot use efficiently enough at home. It gives you larger machines, faster throughput, multiple loads at once, industrial drying power, and a way to compress an annoying domestic burden into a managed block of time. That's why the storefront is misleading. The real product is not, we clean clothes. The real product is, we let you solve this problem here, now, at scale. In dense apartment neighborhoods, that matters even more. A lot of laundromat revenue is really built on the absence of in-unit washers and dryers, or on old buildings with shared laundry rooms people hate using, or on households with too many people and not enough appliance capacity, or on renters whose housing setup turns a basic domestic function into a recurring inconvenience. So the business is not just profiting from dirty clothes, it is profiting from a housing gap. That is a big upgrade in how you should think about it. Because a laundromat is not simply a retail service floating around in the economy. It is a toll booth placed between people and a basic household function they cannot skip. And once a business sits in that position, it does not need to be beautiful. It needs to be available. That's why so many shabby-looking laundromats still work. Customers are often not buying experience. They are buying resolution. And that's where the model starts to get a little darker. Because the less choice a customer has, the more valuable that access becomes. Laundry is not the kind of purchase people usually approach in a perfectly rational, price-optimized state. They do it when time is short, when the hamper is full, when their kid needs clothes for school tomorrow, when work uniforms are out, when the apartment machine is broken, when the weekend is already slipping away. That urgency changes behavior. People notice whether the machines work, whether the place feels safe, whether parking is annoying, whether they can finish quickly, whether it's clean enough to tolerate. What they usually do not do is launch a full analytical comparison over small differences in pricing. Once you've already hauled in 30 pounds of clothes, started 2 washers, and committed the next hour of your life, you're in. There's a sunk cost effect built right into the experience. You don't optimize from that point. You finish, and while you're there, spending expands almost invisibly. The dryer costs extra. The larger machine costs more but saves time. Detergent from the vending machine is overpriced, but maybe you forgot yours. Wash and fold sounds expensive until you're tired enough. An oversized load, a comforter, a second dry cycle, a snack, a soap refill. Individually, these are small decisions. Collectively, they make the business stronger. There's also something emotionally sticky about this kind of service. Families value routine. If a laundromat is good enough, close enough, safe enough, reliable enough, that may be enough to keep the household coming back for years. Not because anyone loves it, because nobody wants to rethink it. That's one of the hidden strengths here. The business often captures customers when they are short on time, low on patience, and trying to get life back under control. Those are not ideal conditions for aggressive comparison shopping. But even that still isn't the full story, because the really interesting money is often made behind the visible customer experience in the operational math most people never think about. A laundromat is basically an efficiency problem disguised as a storefront. Profit comes down to throughput, utility costs, machine mix, maintenance discipline, layout, and uptime. It is not enough to own washers. You have to keep them producing. How many cycles can each machine run in a day? Which sizes are most profitable? Where do bottlenecks happen? Washers, dryers, folding tables, payment flow. How much water is being used? How much gas? How much electricity? What happens when a machine is down for 3 days? What happens during peak evening hours or Sunday surges? How do you price a giant machine so it feels efficient to the customer but still pushes revenue upward? That's not quaint shopkeeping. That's systems management. The owner who wins is often the one who thinks like an operator, not a shopkeeper. Bigger machines can raise ticket size dramatically. Card systems can reduce the friction of coin use and let customers spend more fluidly. Digital pricing can be adjusted more precisely. Wash and Fold introduces a higher service layer. Commercial accounts from local businesses, salons, gyms, or small rentals can create steadier volume. A machine down at the wrong time is not an inconvenience. It is a leaking asset. And this is where the category stops looking sleepy and starts looking industrial. So why do so many laundromats still look old? Why do they seem almost resistant to polish? Because many owners are not trying to build a lifestyle brand. They are trying to preserve cash flow. If the machines run, the water works, the dryers heat, and the neighborhood keeps coming, the aesthetic upgrade may not matter enough to justify the cost. In some cases, looking plain is almost part of the logic. This is not a prestige business. It is a utility business wearing retail clothes. And that is the moment when the topic gets bigger than laundry. Because laundromats become more powerful precisely where home life is less equipped. They thrive in places with smaller apartments, older housing stock, fewer in-unit appliances, tighter budgets, and less flexibility. In other words, they often do best where people have fewer private conveniences and more dependence on shared infrastructure. So the storefront is not just serving a neighborhood, it is monetizing a specific version of urban life that makes the business more complicated than it first appears. On one hand, laundromats are genuinely useful, essential. Even when one closes, loss is not symbolic. It can force people to travel farther, spend more time, carry more weight, and reorganize already fragile routines. A laundromat can be a real piece of neighborhood infrastructure, but it is also infrastructure that charges admission. And that means it can become a quiet extractor of hardship. It makes money because a certain kind of inconvenience keeps existing, because certain buildings remain under-equipped, because some households lack the time, space, or appliance access that wealthier households take for granted. When rents rise and neighborhoods redevelop, the people who need laundromats most are often the people most exposed to displacement. If those residents leave, the business model shifts. If the laundromat leaves first, the neighborhood loses a practical survival tool. So now we are far away from the original picture of a dusty coin-op shop. We are looking at a pressure point in the housing system, and that leads to the real thesis. A laundromat is not really a laundry business. It is a neighborhood utility toll booth. It monetizes missing in-home infrastructure. It monetizes compressed time. It monetizes repetition, density, urgency, and the fact that some parts of domestic life do not wait for a more convenient moment. That is why these businesses can look small and make big money. The square footage is small, the sign is small, the customer interaction is small, but the dependency is huge. The plain exterior tricks people into underestimating the business. We tend to notice businesses that feel premium, fashionable, or aggressively modern. But some of the strongest business models are built around inevitability, not excitement. They sit quietly between people and a routine they cannot avoid. And once you understand that, the opening scene changes. Now, when someone walks into a laundromat with 2 baskets and a bottle of detergent, you are not just watching a chore. You are watching a household enter a system shaped by housing design, neighborhood density, time pressure, and access. The washers are not just appliances. They are revenue engines placed exactly where everyday life breaks down. That little storefront isn't humble in the way it first appears. It's strategic. It sits there waiting for the same thing to happen again next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. Not because it created a want, but because it positioned itself inside a need. And that may be the strangest part of all. Some of the most profitable businesses do not look powerful from the outside. They look boring. They look old. They look almost invisible. But invisibility can be a kind of strength when your product is woven into real life, deeply enough that people stop seeing the system and only feel the routine. So the next time you pass a laundromat, don't just see a place that washes clothes. See the access it sells. See the housing gap underneath it. See the time pressure it monetizes. See the neighborhood infrastructure hiding behind the plastic chairs and humming dryers. Because once you do, that small little shop on the corner doesn't look small anymore.